Welcome to Silicon Valley Successes. This is the first episode of many to come. What we are doing here is we are building a reference library that anyone in the world can access, the experts here in Silicon Valley, and the resources and the years' experience. And the goal behind it is through this access to help people achieve their goals wherever they are in the world. So with that, I just want to say thank you for joining me and the team here at Silicon Valley Successes as we go through this journey to build something to hopefully help you. Now in this process, some of the information you may agree or may not agree with, but we are doing our best because we really want to help everyone out there. So with that, I would like to introduce my first guest, the first guest on Silicon Valley Successes, CJ. CJ, could you please give an introduction of who you are and how you've worked and helped out the Silicon Valley ecosystem?
Absolutely. Well, first off, Sean, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's a pleasure. I am actually a Silicon Valley native myself. I've been around the area for a while, and I've gotten the chance over a number of years to help startups and mid-sized companies help with their marketing. And I've done that in a number of capacities. I actually started out on the social media side, where I helped a company launch a social messenger app into different local communities across America. We had great success with that, garnering a few million downloads within a few months. And so with gusto, I moved on to the next sort of areas within marketing. That included enterprise collateral development for B2B enterprise data storage and computer networking type companies, as well as more B2C type product companies. And so I've managed campaigns that over the years have been had products sold in over 20 countries, as well as getting about 300,000 different types of conversions through different people that have expressed interest, through digital campaigns we've launched, through events that I've helped manage within the social community and also tech startup community. And products that I've marketed over the years have actually been viewed around 8 million times online and been experienced offline cumulatively about that amount. And so what this is all built into is this idea of what I like to call growth marketing.
Okay, so let's touch on that topic, growth marketing.
Sure.
And the idea behind this is to give as much information out there to startups around the world and founders and entrepreneurs. So I've heard that term growth marketing quite a bit. How is that different than regular marketing?
So when it comes to marketing, there are a number of different topics that are involved. And one would be, a common idea is inbound marketing, where it's more content focused. People express their interest and then come to you through either a lead generation form that you have out there, a blog, webinars, things like that. There's also other types of ideas like growth hacking, which is more working on short-term technical hacks or product enhancements, and then building out audiences through that sort of viral marketing sort of concepts ingrained into the product. And then there are other forms as well, including advertising as such. The idea of growth marketing is actually more holistic. It's something where whenever you're marketing anything, let's take a pen, for example,
Okay.
right? If you're selling a pen,
I love the pen example.
yes, and I know some people are probably thinking, yes, I know where you got that example from.
But go on. We'll pretend everyone out there hasn't seen that amazing popular movie.
Yes, absolutely, where they have to sell the pens. So the idea is that when you're selling a pen, right, first off, you have to understand not only the values of the company, but the value you bring to people. And you're going to do that for different types of target audiences. People have different interests in the pen. And so to do that, they're going to be in different locations. For example, some may be on social media. Some may only buy high-end pens. It may be a product extension. And they may only be offline in close-knit communities. They may also be in other, what we like to call channels. And so when you have all these different types of channels, you have different types of messaging. And for each of these types of channels, the messaging you have to tweak just like anything else and work through. The concept of growth marketing is understanding when you're selling that pen in each of those different channels to each of those different audiences, what do those channels look like? What are they? Also, what is the journey that each customer goes on from first awareness to conversion, to prospect, to customer, and potentially if they retain long enough and they use that pen just long enough, they might become your advocate.
Go over those steps one more time that you just mentioned. That was pretty interesting.
Sure thing. And it's actually a 5-step process. I personally call it an inverted pyramid.
Inverted pyramid.
Yes,
Okay.
or an inverted diamond, but I tend to call it an inverted pyramid because it's very easy to visualize, right? The idea is that a typical customer journey is going to be seen as what we commonly call a marketing funnel.
Okay.
Imagine a marketing funnel, just like any, what a funnel would look like, but I'll double that and then flip it, right? So now you actually have another funnel that's a mirror image, but vertically flipped. So it looks like a triangle, that's basically then flipped.
Okay.
Right? So that's why I call it the inverted pyramid, right? The idea behind that is that there's 5 stages for this entire process. First, you have the awareness. Let's take the pen example, right? You first see a pen in, let's say, a popular retail store, right? That's the first impression, perhaps, or it might be through an advertisement. The idea is with growth marketing, you have to understand which channels first off, right? But the idea is that there's 5 stages, so let's focus on that for right now. So you have first the awareness stage. Once people see things, you then have to convert them somehow so you know how to follow up with them.
Okay.
And so that's going to be the second stage. So first is awareness, second is a conversion, right, into what we commonly call a lead. So they've exchanged some sort of a form of information. They've given you a number, an email, maybe they've given you a business card at a conference for when you're selling those pens, right? And the third stage is they turn into prospects. Now, prospects are those, of course, there's different definitions around the industry, but I believe there's a lot of credibility as to this process where you have a viewer, a lead, and then a prospect. Because the prospects are someone you nurture, there's a likelihood of them becoming a customer.
Okay.
And so this process takes some time, depending on the type of offering you're selling. If it's a $5 premium pen, or if it's going to be a $100,000 data storage system.
Okay.
Right? Each takes a different journey. And so understanding your journey is tantamount. And the prospect journey is really
I like how
important.
you throw out the big words there.
Well, I try not to too often, but there's some words that just tell it so much better than others. And so when it comes to prospecting, right, this is a nurturing process. It's where you're establishing trust, establishing understanding, not just of the customer, but the customer understands your company and what you stand for.
So quick question on that.
Sure.
Say you're an early stage company. When is a good time to start this marketing process? Is it when you just have the idea in your head, when you've written down on paper, when you have your MVP, your minimum viable product, or after you've already raised some type of funding? When should I start thinking about this?
Absolutely. Well, a good point is it depends on, first off, if you're a B2B or a B2C type of offering.
Okay, business to business or business to consumer.
You got it, Sean. And so if you're selling to a business, that's B2B, right? As you mentioned, and B2C is when you're selling to an individual or a group of individuals. So if you're B2B, it's typically going to be a longer a customer journey or a customer life cycle. And so to think of when you're going to be marketing to them, it's typically more relationship driven. So it's going to be a slower cycle, but you want to start nurturing those relationships. This is not necessarily part of the prospect stage, which I just mentioned, but you're nurturing relationships throughout the first viewer stage, the lead, the prospect stage when they become a customer, number 4, and when they become an advocate, number 5.
Okay.
And so when to start for B2B, it's really establishing those relationships before you even potentially even building the product. Right?
Oh, wow.
It's obviously not 100% fit for everyone, but that's the best chances that you have. Because when you are ready to now sell, you have someone that already trusts you.
So before, when I just have an idea, I might already want to start at that point, reaching out to potential customers and seeing if there's interest.
Yeah, and a way I might tweak that is instead of potential, what you might call them as customers, I would even call them as colleagues, friends, associates.
Okay.
Right? Because before they become customers, again, they have to trust you. There has to be some sort of promise that your brand represents. And so if they don't have that, if they don't understand what it is, right, they're likely not going to buy unless they have a super pressing need, which is a different conversation.
But B2B, that need would be so far down the road. I mean, 6 months, a year possibly.
Exactly.
Sorry to cut you off there, but I want to throw that in there.
It's a good point. And so if you're in a commodities industry, it's more important than ever to have relationships that drive that sale, right? If it's going to be a new innovative product, the product itself may actually be what people are convinced by. But that's on the B2B side. The relationships are really key. There are, of course, going to be advertising and content marketing campaigns that are important to that effort.
Okay.
But the relationships are especially important because you're going to be working with different influencers within that company.
Okay.
You're also going to be working with different buyers within that company. It may be one buyer, it may be the CFO.
Huh.
It may be the CEO and the CFO
Okay.
who both have purchase power. It's a company by company basis. But to be able to win their interest, you first have to establish the relationship.
Okay. And
And
what
on
about B2C?
Great, a great transition. I was actually just going to go into that. And so I'm glad you asked. With the B2C side, this is more mass market exposure.
Yeah.
So it's going to be much harder when on the B2B side you're trying to sell 10 companies or maybe 100 companies. On B2C, you may be trying to sell 10,000 or a million. And
Okay.
so it's going to be very difficult to establish relationships with all of them. The best way to do this is through content marketing. This is how you nurture these relationships at scale. And so when you start doing this, right, this is going to be something where if you need to get a lot of press, PR, prior to something, if you need a lot of people in other words, if you're marketing something that's going to need a lot of people to be valuable, you need to start doing that earlier.
Okay.
But if people find intrinsic value from what you're offering, only by themselves or through their family, you don't need as large of an audience to impress them. For example, if you're creating a social network or a dating app or something where there's an event sort of venue service, you'll need a larger audience for that to be useful.
Yeah.
And so gathering that audience beforehand is going to be really important. But if you have something that doesn't need those audiences to be useful, perhaps a pen, a glass, a table, anything that people don't need audiences for, that can actually start to be done later. But what's going to be important in either scenario, for either of those two types of mass market products that need an audience, for those that don't need an audience, or for B2B, branding is going to be critical.
Okay, so tell me about the first steps to build a brand.
Absolutely. First thing, people have to understand if you're externally facing already, in other words, you've already made something, you're going out to the public, people have to know who you are. A lot of people buy into companies kind of like as their friends. They like to buy from people, regardless of how many people you're marketing to. They still like to get to know the people behind it. And so the first step to a brand is telling people, again, who you are, so your origin story, your vision. What do you want to do in this world? What do you want to change about it? And it doesn't have to be the whole world. It could simply be local communities. It could simply be a new organization, a nonprofit, maybe 1,000 nonprofits. But the idea is, what is it that you envision for the future? What is it that you are going to be doing? And then the mission, how are you going to get there?
Okay, now question on this. If I'm an early stage startup, I may not have funding at all. I may have a very limited budget. Well, you just told me this big vision may not be in my price range. What does a go-to-market strategy cost, or what should I be thinking about when I make a budget for it?
Yeah, and Sean, you bring up a good point. There are a lot of people who think that branding, marketing, advertising is really expensive. There's, I think in anything you do, there's always an opportunity to make it very expensive, but the best ones out there find a way to maximize the limited resources that they have. And the good thing about it is that branding and go-to-market, which I'll go to in a moment, that's actually free if you want to make it free.
Tell us about that.
Sure, because I know a lot of people are interested in this. Now, I don't want to confuse the viewers to think that all branding and all marketing is free. It's not true. But what I'm saying is that to understand what you represent, to understand the values, to understand what you want to be associated with as a company and what you don't want to be associated with, writing those ideas out are free, right? Understanding who you are, what you represent, and where you want to go, that's something that you can find out internally and amongst your founding team.
Okay.
Right? When it comes to the idea of then employing more people to do blogging at scale or webinars at scale or email marketing at scale or some sort of channel activity, right? The idea is you have different channels to market to.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to probably need more people, and those people are probably going to cost money because they're building their own careers as well. It's a sensible act, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really when a lot of marketing money comes into talk. In advertising, it's almost always going to cost you, right? Practically every time. There are exceptions, but
do you have any tips or tricks or hacks or
you know, there are definitely a couple. You know, one is something that some people watching today might actually have heard of. It's called guerrilla marketing.
Tell us about it. How is that different than growth marketing?
So, I'll actually draw a parallel between growth hacking and guerrilla marketing. There's a lot of similarities. Growth hacking happens to be online, and guerrilla marketing happens to be offline.
Okay.
And so when it comes to growth hacking, it's more of a product tweak, a product enhancement, maybe downloading information or something like that to get your company ahead online. When it comes to guerrilla marketing, the idea is that they're low cost or free options in which to really broaden the exposure to whatever it is you're building. For example, if you were going on if there's thousands of people that went on a popular hike, right, on the mountains, and you were a popular company that happened to like to sell to hikers, and there were some popular destinations along the way. And let's say, for example, you had the rights to maybe paint a boulder, right? Or something almost ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Like that. But the thing is, people will stop and look at it. People will remember that. People will make that part of the destination.
Oh, okay.
And when people take photos of that, we live in a world of social media, sharing selfies and all the photos and videos you could imagine.
Yeah, like here. I'm sure everyone here on this stage is going to share this with all their social media.
Absolutely. And no, you're absolutely right, Sean. And that's the neat thing about this too. With guerrilla marketing, it's offline, it's relatively low priced, and the idea is that you get mass exposure, but it's not guaranteed.
Okay.
And there is a technique to doing that. And so bringing on the right people to help you do that sort of thing can definitely help. If you have people internally that can help you out as well, it's really important. It's not that it has to be difficult. It just has to be something that's special that people care about to share. And if you can think about that in any location where there are a lot of eyeballs, people seeing stuff, that's the important part.
So question on that. When to focus on guerrilla marketing, when to focus on growth marketing, and when to change your plan in the process?
Yes. So
I know that's a lot in one question, but
it is, but it's a great question. And it's something that people need to deliberate. Some companies are inherently not built for guerrilla marketing or growth hacking. Some companies have very expensive products. I'll give you an example, by the way. There is this idea of what's called a viral loop. And some people who have not heard of it.
Yeah,
right?
Go into detail, please.
Sure.
Explain.
So a viral loop, it's debated a little bit exactly what this means, but pretty clearly stated. The idea is that think of any popular, I won't name names, but the fastest growing social media startups that you may have heard of, or that are very popular out there, or any sort of email that grew very fast. We can all think of examples, right?
Yeah.
I don't say a name on purpose so that we can fill in what resonates with us most.
Yeah.
Right. The idea is that those are inherently viral enabled. In other words, you sign up, you share it to a friend, and by the time that friend that you referred signs back up to that service, that's one viral loop.
Okay.
Simply put. And some products just are not built for that. Some products, when they cost $50,000, $500,000, $3 million for a government project, for example, something big scale, right? It's not going to be viral in terms of the product itself, but the information surrounding it could be viral.
So what if that type of information could be used by startups or early stage companies?
Which information are you referring to?
Just any tips or tricks for if they want to do a viral campaign themselves.
So first I would need to understand, or the founders would need to just internally think about this. Is their product actually built for virality? And it's fine if it's not. It doesn't have to be successful. But for those that are in the software space, for those that are basically digitally focused, or if they're not digitally focused, but they have a digital footprint, they get their name out online, for example, things like that, they have much higher chances of success to go viral. And again, this is a great way to do it on a limited budget if you have the right mechanics built into this. If there's a trigger, if there's an action, a reward, things like that.
Okay. And
if it also builds value for them over time, it increases in value, which if you can do that, oh my gosh, you're gonna get them hooked, right? It's invaluable to do. And so there are some really cool ways in which to do that, but each company has their own opportunity. And when it comes to guerrilla marketing, I'd say some really cool ways to think about that is look for what inspires you online. Think through things that you've seen do this, whether they be posters on bus stops that just made you stop and gawk, right? I mean, that's an example of guerrilla marketing. If there's something online that you just can't get out of your head, right? That's an example of growth marketing or a very well-made advertisement, right? It takes definitely a creative approach to do this.
Okay, so far we've talked about many different things. We've talked about growth marketing, guerrilla marketing. We've talked about online, offline. We've talked about how to build a brand. We've talked about go-to-market and the cost that are with that.
Yeah.
We've talked about adjusting the marketing plan. What else could we summarize what you've just talked about? I mean, and adds any more tidbits or tricks while you're doing that?
Certainly. And it's a lot to ask, but I think it's a worthy question to ask nonetheless, because it's the earliest days of any company's launch are the most important until the point they start getting customers. And then all of a sudden, it becomes even more important to live up to what you say on paper and make that a reality to them. It's part of that brand promise that I mentioned earlier. And so I go back to this 5-stage effort, right? It's the idea that you first want to understand, and actually, even before we get there, I'll mention this. First off, understand what it is you're making, right? That's going to be super critical, right? And I don't mean that if you know how to make it, doesn't mean necessarily you know what you actually are making. Customers may change their minds about how they want it to be or what they want it to be, and that's the idea of pivoting according to how customers regularly engage. That's an important one. And more importantly, if it's something that costs money, watch the customers who are paying for this, not the people that are not paying for it.
Okay.
If it's a service that they use for free, a freemium service, or if it's a free offering in general, just watch for those who use it, right? But watch it en masse. You don't want to go simply towards the people, small quantities of people. You want to try to make it as what we call statistically significant as possible.
Okay.
In other words, the lowest delta, and what I mean by delta is basically the lowest change. So in other words, if a lot of people are doing it, there's a good chance more people want to do it too. But then you have to understand how to segment this accordingly. And so I go back to this 5-step process. When you know who you're going to, understand how many people you need to kind of see this to understand, what they're going to regularly engage with. First off, you have to get people to look at it, right?
Okay.
Online, offline, regardless, you have to get people in front of it. Quantity matters when it comes to the marketing funnel, right? And so when you get enough people or viewers to see it, then you have to think through, well, how do we get them to that next level? How do we get them closer to becoming users or customers, right?
Okay.
So the next one is, again, becoming a lead, right? And leads can come from typically what you'd call landing pages. You might use that in an advertisement. Leads may also come from trade shows where you exchange business cards. Leads may also come from simply casual encounters on the street, things like this. The idea is that you exchange information. That's the key part. You exchange information with an intent for something more. And if you give them, let's say for a B2B company, you give them a white paper, or you give them a sell sheet, or you give them a reviewer's guide, or you give them a free sample of a product for an influencer on YouTube or Instagram, something like that. That's going to be important to then get them to the next level, right? Where if they're going to be now influenced some way through what you're offering, nurture them into prospects. Get them to understand really the value of what you're delivering instead of choosing a competitor, right? Think through how you can engage them more. Does that mean getting their friends involved with them? Does that mean getting their colleagues involved with them? Does that mean getting specifically their department or influencers at their school or workplace? Other things like that.
So with all that information,
Yes.
narrow it down even more. What advice would you give a founder?
Number one, focus on delivering something of value, right? What that means is if people see it, they say they want it, and then they buy it, you're going to be in a pretty good place. If you can then do that same exact process at scale, you're going to be even better.
It's pretty good advice. I was going to ask you another question. What would be the most valuable advice you'd give a founder? But I think you just nailed that one.
Focus on the customer.
Great.
If they love you, you're going to be doing well.
Okay, and CJ, I want to give you the opportunity. Could you talk about yourself and how you work specifically with companies right now, in the past, or moving forward?
Absolutely. So I work with companies on a number of ways, 3 in particular. One is business model generation, thinking through the foundation of your business. This is going to be so important later on. There's 9 key areas to look through, but the most important part to remember out of this stage, just saying we know what the heck we're doing from a company standpoint, we know what we're doing for our product, and we know what we're going to deliver, when we're going to deliver, things like that. It's generating that business model, all-encompassing of what it is we're going to do. The second thing is brand formation.
Mm.
This is going to be a continuous evolution throughout your company's entire history, and present and future. And what I mean by history is some things when people look in the past, you may need to rebuff that and live up to those values that you once said and build that into the future. What I'm trying to impress is the fact that with brand management, you have to understand who you are, what you represent, your origins, your present, your future, what people are going to perceive you as, who they're going to associate with you. And the first thing that they think of you, is it what you want them to think about you? That's part of the brand formation. And that can be pre-launch or post-launch. And the third being go-to-market management. Go-to-market management is critical to understanding not only is what you are creating useful, it's understanding how we're going to get to the next stage, how we're going to think through the 5 different phases of the product innovation lifecycle. Everything from the innovators, to the early adopters, to the early majority, to the late majority. 68% of the market is contained just within the early and late majorities.
Interesting.
You have to sell to them somehow if you want to scale your company. And the last part being the laggards, those who are kind of content with what they're already doing, but you can still sell it to them either if you affix it to a product they're content with or other options. And each of these 5 stages have their own method of approach. And within each of these 5, then you start to think about the 5 stages. Captivate the viewers, convert them into leads, nurture them as prospects, close them as customers, and of course, once they're delighted enough with what you offer, make them your advocates, and sky's the limit.
Oh, wow. Okay. CJ, with that, I want to thank you for all the help and your time that you've given to us. I want to thank everyone for watching this first episode of Silicon Valley Successes, and to tell you more about this journey that we're going to go on. Every week we'll have new industry experts from Silicon Valley here on the show. We'll also be interviewing startup founders and talk to them about their daily lives and what they actually face, and try to give real-world information that's useful. So with that, our next guest that we'll have on this show is Shahid, whose background is in investment banking. He's worked with startups from around the world, helping them with their financing plans, helping them get ready to raise capital and raise capital. He has many years of working with startups from all over the world. It's going to be an amazing episode. So with that, if you want more information about CJ and what he's working on, there's information on Silicon Valley Successes or CJ's website. What is your website?
Sure. My website is simple. My first and last name.com, being CJTERRAL.com.
Thank you, guys.